honeys, you're in my kitchen again, and I think I am going to make some tea, and then I'm going to do my pots. Got this little tea caddy here with a pink elephant on it, and inside it are tons of different teas where the box has been kind of like half empty and I've just taken the tea out and gotten rid of the box. So let's have a little look at some of the stuff that we've got in here. Oh, I've got some bedtime teas left over in here. That can only be a good thing. I love a bedtime tea. I've got some St. Clement's by Twinings and a Yogi tea ginger orange. These are just ordinary breakfast teas, I think. And oh, a Pucker Love Blend. I did not know that I had a Pucker Love Blend, so I'm definitely going to have this. But I can spy in here some organic green tea and Moroccan mint, so let me get that out because I will be taking that to my mum's house because I love these and I didn't realise I had any of these left either. Pucker Love Blend. This is rose, chamomile and lavender. So gorgeous. Does anybody else keep stationery in their kitchen? I have got a magnetic pad on the fridge and a few pens in here for when I need to make notes in the kitchen. You never know when you might need to make notes at the drop of a bloody hat. One thing that I have realised since being on YouTube and talking about my personal spiritual journey on YouTube and describing it and kind of getting into the fine detail of it is that there's always going to be something that's lost in translation. There's always going to be, once your spiritual journey hits a certain degree of complexity and you've figured things out in your mind and you understand how they go, but you're trying to explain it for people that don't have it as their spiritual journey and are standing outside of it, there is something lost in translation, and that is inevitable, and there's really nothing that you can do about that. And if you're going to be on any kind of public platform, whether it's a blog, a channel, whether you're part of a spiritual group, whatever you're doing, if you're writing books and you're talking about your personal spiritual journey, in a way you have to allow that to be the case, and you've got to kind of just go with it and flow with it and recognize that even if you do your level best to explain what is going on for you in your spiritual framework, something is always lost, something is always beyond words, and even as you're explaining it, you could be in the process of finding that your opinions are transitioning, or that you are trying to formulate a better way of explaining something, and further down the line you will have a better way of explaining it, but for now these words are the best words that you can choose, and there's nothing, you know, further that you can really add because you don't know yourself yet how to explain and how to organize your thoughts on your own path, you know. So I've had a lot of comments underneath my videos where I've been talking about my own journey that betray a fundamental lack of understanding of what my journey actually is. But I don't blame those people for that. I think that it's a very tough thread to follow. It's very labyrinthine. I think listening to anybody's beliefs, when you go really into depth about what someone believes spiritually, if they have any kind of spiritual framework at all, then it's already quite difficult to keep hold of the thread as they're explaining to you what is going on for them and what things really mean and what the framework is. But I think that somebody like me, who's just got this very, very out of left field spirituality as far as a lot of people are concerned, is going to have a very difficult time explaining accurately what is happening, and there is going to be a lot of misunderstanding, and that's something that I have witnessed over my time doing YouTube. But as I said, you've just got to basically be okay with it, and that's all that you can do. No marigolds on today, guys, because my nails are totally fucked anyway, so let's get straight into it. One of the main reasons that I choose to share my own spiritual journey with people and talk a little bit about my altar setup, my matron, you know, the way that I approach magic and that kind of thing, is to show people what's possible. That's principally why I do it, is to show people that, you know, you really can have your cake and eat it in spirituality. You really can design something that makes sense for you and that really kind of flicks your switch. And I've done that. So I think one of the best examples I could use of spiritual sovereignty, spiritual anarchy, if you will, and I do have a video coming on what I think that means, is to use my own path as an example. My own path is very winding and very weird. I am a pantheist. I consider myself to be a pantheistic witch. I consider myself to be a chaos witch though, which means that I do shift between paradigms, and I accept that sometimes pantheism isn't actually the most useful paradigm for me. and I sometimes find that polytheism and some aspects of what appear on the surface to be hard polytheism are actually much more in keeping with my needs, and so I switch to that paradigm. Does that paradigm constitute my actual core belief structure? No, not really, but I don't think that matters. I think that I can use whatever is most useful for me at any given moment, and that's what I do. And I think that's one of the main things that really fucks with a lot of people and kind of like bugs them out about what I'm doing with my journey, is that I'm saying with the one hand that I'm pantheist, and with the other hand, I'm like, you know, but actually I have this really close, intimate working relationship with my matron, whom I suppose I describe in kind of a mother figure sort of a way, really, and I think that confuses people. Another thing that really seems to confuse people a hell of a lot is the fact that I state that everything is sacred, that everything is divine, that it's all part of one big system of divinity, but I also choose to focus my reverence and my attention on only certain facets of divinity, of that overarching all, if you will. And a lot of people are confused by that as well, and they say things like, well, I'm a pantheist and I don't see the point in my pantheism in having a matron or anything like that. It doesn't make any sense, because, you know, really what you're saying is that you're prizing one particular facet of divinity over any other, or you're recording a particular archetype with more power or more reverence than others, and that means you're not pantheistic in your outlook. But I would disagree. I would say that there's a difference between, well, I would say that there's a harmony, if you like, between seeing everything as a facet of divinity and actually deciding to zoom in on certain facets because you have a particular interest in them or because they're particularly helpful to you at a certain time. I don't think that kind of zooming in on one thing or highlighting or underlining and working with one thing means that you have diminished the divinity of any other thing at all. I just think it, you know, it makes a difference whereabouts you are in your life, what's going on with you, what your spiritual path actually calls for, what would be the most useful for you on your spiritual journey, and that will very much determine what you end up focusing on the path. And that's okay, that's absolutely okay. That's something that I think a lot of people have anyway, whether their paradigm is atheistic, pantheistic, panentheistic, monotheistic, polytheistic, animistic. The thing is, I understand what I'm doing when I work with personified deity. I have, I think, a very clear understanding of what I'm doing when I work with personified deity. It makes sense to me. Whenever I attempt to explain it, I do get a few people saying that the light bulb has come on for them and that they do understand what I'm trying to say, but just as many, if not more people, find themselves feeling perplexed as fuck by what I'm actually saying and what I'm meaning, you know? I believe that I have an eternal internal mother. That's what I've always personally referred to it as. I don't think I picked that up anywhere necessarily. I think it's just something that I started saying, but I could be wrong. But the eternal internal mother and father are two archetypes that are really interesting and important to me and that I've thought about a lot. And what I basically mean by internal and eternal mother and father is that you can self-parent. I had a father growing up and I had a mother growing up. It might not necessarily be the same for people that had other kinds of parental templates growing up. But for me, it's relevant. It's very relevant that I'm working with personified female deity in a way that sometimes could be described as having quite a mothering kind of flavour to it, you know? That is relevant to me because I had a very difficult time with my mother growing up. I had a tumultuous relationship with my mother growing up. My mother was trying to mother herself, okay? When you're trying to mother yourself and you are trying to deal with generational patterns of abuse and neglect, it's very difficult for you also to mother 3 children, particularly if 2 of them are girls who are probably reminding you every day of shit that happened to you and horrible things that you went through, and even the very presence of these girls around you growing up is triggering the fuck out of you. You know, and you've had really no help, you don't really understand anything about psychology or self-development or spirituality or anything like that. You've always just denied the pain you went through, ignored it, stuffed it down or made light of it. That's what my mum used to do, you know. It's very, very tough when life is like that for you. So I would definitely strongly state with no apprehension that I missed out on a lot of the stuff that I felt I needed and wanted from a mother growing up. And I had a difficult relationship with my mum. She made some decisions that I didn't agree with. She made some decisions that put me and my sister in danger. It wasn't a good time. It wasn't a good time. So for me, yes, there is an element of my work with personified female deity anyway that I'm sure is about recognising my ability to mother myself. Do I need Hell, my matron deity, to lean in and whisper something to me cosmically in her peculiar, particular cosmic languages? Do I need her to send me signs and symbols? Do I need to draw runes that will allow me to communicate with her higher knowing? No, I don't. I have all of that stuff in me. I'm sure of it. I'm sure that the work I do with Hell is really just working with a mirror image, a perfectly crystal clear archetypal image of stuff that I already have stored in me. Hell is absolutely a part of me. Not only that, but she's a part of my psyche that I can relate to a lot. Above and beyond other goddesses, and I think this happens to a lot of people who choose to work with goddesses, is that they select goddesses with whom they have a genuine affinity, that they can see themselves in. And that's what I'm doing. I'm working with that mirror image. Do I absolutely need that mirror image? Probably not, but it's been insanely helpful. It's been incredibly helpful to me. And yes, the relationship now that I have with that particular archetype is a relationship that is moving and changing, animated and dynamic. And I absolutely can receive signs and symbols from that part of the anatomy of my psyche that is laced with Hell that I would not have been able to otherwise. It is a massive psycho-spiritual tool. Now, I can understand what I mean when I say that, and some of you will listen to that and go, yeah, I can understand what you mean when you say that. But for other people, I've lost them, you know, I've lost them. And sometimes I do get these comments that are just like, what the fuck are you talking about? I get other comments that are like, how can you believe in all of these different gods and goddesses from these different pantheons? How can you believe they're all real? And those people don't understand what I'm trying to say. I don't believe they're all real in the sense that they think I think they're real, you know? I do think they're all real, but not in the way that they think that I do. There's other people that are saying things like, well, you know, if you believe in this thing, then you can't also believe in this thing, because the two things are just fundamentally different. But, you know, my belief structure is such that I believe that anything that we've come up with to explain this incredible presiding and pervading sense that we have, that we are made of something bigger than just our individual ego selves, anything we've come up with to explain that and to unify with it is holy and sacred and deserves my consideration. I don't worry about one thing being true against the other thing. I'm more concerned really with the fact that different cultures and civilizations have come up with these different things, or channeled these different things, if you will, to explain how they have their own pervading sense that you know, there is something pantheistic happening, there is something cosmic happening. So there's lots of comments that kind of you know, show that someone has really not gotten it, and that's okay, because it's really hard for me to explain it beyond what I can explain it, beyond how I can explain it, you know. I got a comment once from a guy that was like, I'm really disappointed in you and in this video, because I thought you were smarter than this. I thought that you were beyond believing all this claptrap about gods and goddesses. I can't actually believe that you do believe these things, but you say you do, so ho-hum. And I remember thinking, there's nothing illogical about my beliefs. There's nothing unscientific about my beliefs. There's nothing that flies in the face of science that, you know, can be found in my belief structure. You're not getting it. You're the one that's missed a trick, not me. But I leave those kinds of comments anyway, you know, I just leave people like that to it. I'm not here to fulfill somebody's perfect silhouette, somebody's outline of how they feel that somebody should or should not think about God. You know, I'm my own person, and the more one gets to know me, the more, sure, somebody might be deeply disappointed by finding out that I think or feel something, but that's only because of what they projected onto me in the first place. And Jung wrote about this shit at length, ladies and gents, so it's really all about what you choose to project onto me and how I would disappoint you by moving away, shifting away from that projection, that distilled, idealised view, and showing myself as being actually a lot more paradoxical and dynamic and confused and confusing than you could ever have imagined me to be, because I'm not a facet of your imagination, I'm a human being. So, you know, that's where your disappointment comes from. Your disappointment comes from recognising that it comes from recognising that I'm not the version of me that you have invented in your brain. I'm actually me. And this kind of thing happens all the time in love matches. When we first fall in love with somebody, there is a very grave danger that we are actually putting some acetate on top of who they really are. We're putting a sheet of acetate on top of who they really are, and on that acetate is the perfect archetypal idealized version that we want them to be and that we want, you know, to believe that they are. And this happens in love matches often, but it happens in lots of other ways as well, all the time. We very often meet somebody and go, oh yeah, you're that kind of person. I see you as this kind of archetype. I can see that you are X, Y, and Z thing. And then as we delve in and we go deeper, we realise that that person is so much more than we ever could have invented, because the imagination, when it comes to our ideas about who a person is, will always be limited. There's always more. There's always oceanic depths we'll never hit, and maybe that individual themselves will never hit those depths either. I told myself for a really long time that if I was a pantheist witch, I couldn't work with personified deity. And for a long time that didn't bother me at all. And actually, back in the day, in like 2008, 2009, maybe right up until about 2010, I was quite judgmental on and off towards people who did work with personified deity. I would read stuff online on the forums, like on the Cauldron and stuff like that. I think the Cauldron is quite dead now. To be honest, most forums are dead now. We're all about Facebook groups now, aren't we? But I would read stuff on the forums, and it would be from people talking about interactions they had with their, you know, matrons and gods and goddesses that they're interacting with. And I would be that eye-rolling person that would be like, what the fuck? Shut up, that did not happen the way you're saying it happened. You can't have these kinds of relationships with ancient deities. I was like, this shit is not kosher. This is not fulfilling me right now. And I used to be that person that was quite judgmental. And I also, you know, recognised that I was pantheist during this kind of time. And I realised that, well, I thought what I realised was that that disqualified me from working with personified deity. It took me a while to realise that when it comes to working with personified deity, there's more than one way to tie your cravat, if you know what I mean. There's lots of different ways that this stuff can work for you, and there are lots of different reasons why you might want to invite a relationship with an archetypal force, you know, a personified deity, a disembodied intelligence of any kind. Am I just talking to a largely inaccessible and very deeply placed part of myself? Yes, I believe I am, but that doesn't mean it's not real, and that doesn't mean my goddesses aren't real. That doesn't mean the archetypes I work with aren't real. That doesn't mean we don't have a dynamic relationship. I really, really believe that. And when it comes to figures, historical figures that I work with, you know, I revere certain figures. I revere Frida Kahlo. I revere Carl Gustav Jung. I celebrate their birthdays at my altar, you know. I have done a bit of work with Geiger on the astral. You know, there's people that have passed on that I really feel like their legacy has left this incredible thread that I can follow into the astral realm, and I can have dynamic experiences. Do I think that they are living on in the exact way that I have imagined that they're living on, and that I'm interacting with them just as I would have done in life? No, I don't, but that doesn't matter to me. It's not important to me. And it's also not really important for me to show my workings all the time as well. And I think that's maybe one of the things I've realised about talking about your own journey on YouTube or anywhere else online, or anywhere with other people, that is so interesting, is that not only do I find it difficult to explain, or nigh on impossible really to explain, certain parts of my journey and certain experiences I've had and certain things that I believe, there are other things that I just can't be bothered to explain. You know, I don't feel the need, I don't feel the burden of proof being laid upon me. And I think that confuses people as well, that I would make a really long video sometimes about my own experiences and my own ideas, but when they claim to want me to you know, show how I can believe two things simultaneously that don't seem to logically go together, or how it is that I've come to this conclusion when, you know, something else I said means something different, or, you know, how I can explain why I believe these things that seem so illogical in someone's eyes. I think it sometimes confuses people that I don't care what they think. I'm not bothered. It doesn't bother me that somebody thinks I'm stupid. It doesn't bother me that somebody thinks I'm silly or daft. I don't care. I have been in that place in the past, as I said, where I was the person judging others who were claiming to have relationships with personified deities, and I believed back then that the only way you could do that is through being a hard polytheist. This is not so. This is not so. There are loads of different ways to have relationships with personified deity, with disembodied intelligences, with you know, the spirit of those that have passed on. It's so much more complicated than just saying that you literally believe that these gods exist somewhere on another realm. And if you do believe that, fine, you know, go at it, have fun with that. But you don't have to believe that to have extremely effectual connections with disembodied intelligences, deities, and so on and so forth. I didn't find my way to my matron deity through being summoned by her. I didn't receive a cosmic message and hit my knees and go, oh my god, it's happening, I'm being contacted by this deity. It didn't happen like that for me. It happened for me in a very, very kind of like straightforward, logical, I suppose you could say, sterile kind of way, where I decided I was going to open up that door and see what happened. That's how it happened for me. I decided I was going to work with a goddess. I decided it was going to be a death goddess. It was an experiment. It was something that wouldn't leave me alone. And I just kept thinking to myself over and over again, maybe there's something in this. It does seem like it fits in with the Jungian paradigm that I've been working in. It does seem like it's just a more literal way of learning from archetypes. It does seem like it could be really meaningful, really meaty, really dynamic. Let me see what it's like. That was literally what it was. And I've said to people before on the channel, my connection with my matron didn't start with fireworks and, you know, cosmic embellishments across the sky and oh my goddess, she's come to me, and a really huge overwhelming sign. I just started looking up death goddesses, and she was the one that I thought was Shangri-La for me, and that was the beginning of our relationship. It was very cold and very straightforward, guys. It was like a, you know, it was like a spiritual Tinder kind of situation, like, hey, I want to go on a date, I think I want this kind of person, oh, there we go, there's one. Like, it was literally like that, you know. If anybody wonders what this is, it's the very end of my Vitalite. I just realised that it came into shot, and I was like, what are they going to think that is? It's Vitalite, guys. I'm just washing the tub for the old recycling situations. It was an experiment. That's what I'm trying to say. It was an experiment. It was something that I consciously got myself into. Since then, the experiences that I've had remaining inside this paradigm of working with personified deity have been off the ever-loving cosmic chain, and I will never go back, I don't think. I can never say never, but I just said never, you know, but I've had some experiences that have really baffled me, and that's something else as well, the fact that when you have certain experiences, you can't explain them to yourself, and it almost goes beyond the desire to explain them to yourself. It's almost like, you know what, I can't explain this, but it doesn't matter. So far from sitting around worrying how I'm going to explain things to my audience on YouTube, sometimes I can't explain things myself, and I have never been able to. It's just one of those things. I opened the door, I opened the box, and a whole load of shit came out, a lot of which I cannot explain. I can only tell you that I'm having a very good time, and it's been, you know, wall-to-wall cosmic shizzle from there on in. Does anybody else always go and grab their little kind of thingy, doodah, what the fuck ever this is called, to read it because they drink yogi tea and there's always something to read? And then you go to read it and you're like, oh, it's pucker, there's no fucking quote on there. Meh. When I really thought about it, I realised that it did make a lot more sense for me to work with personified deity than I thought. Like, I always was interested in mythology growing up, you know, and as a child and stuff, I really sort of paid attention in those classes where we talked about ancient Egyptian stuff and ancient Greek stuff, etc. I really felt a huge affinity with, like, Athena, for example. I was really interested in Dionysus, so it made sense that I was definitely a lot more about that life than a lot of the children that I went to school with, you know. And as a teenager, I very much found comfort in idols, revering idols from the punk scene, from the art scene. You know, I always had somebody I was looking up, somebody I was interested in, an amazing heroic woman from a certain time, an incredible cutting-edge avant-garde artist. I always was looking up quotes from people and learning more and more about people that could inspire me, people that I could admire. That was my whole teenage experience. I had scrapbooks upon scrapbooks of, you know, photos of different people, and they didn't always have to have been virtuous either. I was really interested in people, figures of disrepute, I suppose you could say. I was interested in people from the punk scene that just did nothing but cause trouble, take drugs and check out of life early, you know. I was interested in all manner of different people, and there was something about that I later, when I became more Jung literate, realised was a respect for archetypes and an understanding of the power and the intensity of archetypes when applied to the self. So once I started to see it as a little bit more of a predictable development in my spiritual journey than I had thought at first, I got more comfortable with it. Because at first I kept shrugging it off. I was like, no, you don't want to work with personified deity. You can't anyway. You're a pantheist. It doesn't make any sense. You don't believe that you can have these communications. You don't see them as a part of your framework. So why do you keep thinking about it? Why do you keep obsessing over this idea of having a relationship with a goddess? Like, what is it that you keep insisting upon and going back to? Like, just leave it. And I kept kind of bullying myself to stop thinking about it. But then I kept coming back to this kind of idea that it would be good for me, it would be good for my journey, it would be a good thing for me to do as I was developing into my feminism and starting to see my womanhood in a different kind of way, and exploring you know, the damaging things for me about being raised as a woman and gender and all the rest of it, and you know, just kind of identity as well, growing into my identity, changing in my perception of my identity, like all of these things that were going on in my life. I was thinking, it makes sense that I want to work with goddesses. Why do I keep bullying myself out of it? Why don't I just fucking try it? And if nothing comes of it, then at least I've tried it. I've seen what it could be like for me, you know? It was after I started to have some results working with hell and things really started to feel meaningful for me there, and I realised, like, yeah, I'm getting something from this. This is important work. It was then that I realised that I have actually always maintained my connection with the Blessed Virgin. You may know or you may not know, depending on how long you've been watching the channel for and how many videos of mine you've seen, that my father's side of the family is Irish Catholic. And I was raised, you know, going to mass with my nana. I was not raised Catholic, guys. I was raised, you know, just heathen. But I used to really love going to mass with my nana. I really enjoyed that. So my parents used to let me go to mass, and I just was obsessed with the Virgin Mary. I wasn't really so interested in the other stuff per se. Bits and pieces of it, you know, bits and pieces of the Bible were interesting to me. The rosary, praying the rosary, that kind of thing. The ritualistic vibe of the, you know, the whole situation. I was interested in the idea of confession. I learned about different facets of Catholicism, but it was really my interest in the Blessed Virgin that stuck with me, and she stuck with me. And when I was at the lowest point in my life as a teenager, when I was really starting to become very mentally unwell, she visited me on a couple of occasions, and there was something calming about her presence. I just used to see her I don't want to go into it because it would take a lot to explain, and it would take a lot out of me emotionally to explain at this point in the day where I've got stuff going on, I've got to get ready. But yeah, she came to me. So it was after I had the more kind of sensible, logical discussion with myself, where I was like, Kelly, just work with a goddess, just try it. It was after that I started to think about the Blessed Virgin and the kind of connection I've always had with her since very early childhood, Kali from the Hindu tradition, and how I'd always had a connection with her. And I've told that story a couple of times on the channel about why I have a connection to her and how she came into my life. So it was after that I sort of thought, you know what, I can afford to lean into these more organic things that I now see as relationships with personified deity, or deified beings anyway, in the case of the Blessed Virgin. And so I did. I started to lean into those things again that had always been a part of my life, that I only began to identify them as such after I did what I did with Hell. So Hell broke the seal, if you will, and because of that, and because of the experiences I've had with her, she will always be my head bitch in charge, you know. But certainly I started to realise after doing my work with her that I've always had these other things with these other divine feminine presences kind of thing. So it was well worth doing. And if you are listening to this and you're thinking, I have wanted to work with personified deity, but I've not understood how it could fit into my framework, and I keep thinking it's silly, or I keep thinking I don't even believe in that kind of thing, why does it keep coming up? You know what? Archetypes are powerful. Images of the different parts of our psyches are powerful. Having something as a mirror image of what you know is deep down inside of you that is perhaps unharnessed or unidentified in you, and maybe you just need to see that image of it encapsulated externally to bring you into it more in your own self. There's nothing wrong with that. Do it, try it. I tried it and the payoff has been glorious. But will you be able to always explain it to people? No, probably not. Will people become a little bit frustrated sometimes when you attempt to explain your framework and you just do not do enough of a good job of it in any known language because you simply can't, because it's more complicated than that? Yeah, probably. But just remember as well that you're not actually obligated. You're not obligated actually to explain if you don't want to. But if you try to, there's going to be something lost in translation, and maybe it might be best to explain that before you begin with your explanation of what you're doing and why you're working with personified deity, or indeed doing anything that you're doing that you're trying to explain to a loved one or an audience of any kind. There's going to be something lost in translation, but as long as you know what you're doing, that's really the most important thing, and that's what I wanted to convey in this video. Guys, I absolutely loved reading the comments on the last little kitchen ramble that I did, little housework ramble, where so many of you were telling me that you were getting your chores done while you were watching me doing my chores. I love that. I love the idea that people watch my videos and get something productive done, and I hope that a lot of you have managed to do that again. Let me know in the comments how many of you did your dishes or something else, and I hope that this has been an interesting ramble and it's at least imparted to you why I find it so difficult sometimes to impart things to you. If it's taught you anything, I hope it's at least taught you that. Much love, guys. Blessed be.